Welcome to the Hedgehog and the Fox. My name's Alastair King, your host. I'm a commercial broker, and today we're very excited to be welcoming Daks, who's an artificial intelligence expert. Daks, I don't know if you want to tell everyone a little bit about your company and what you do.
Thanks, Alastair. Thanks for having me. So I run a company called AI Unlocked. We are AI consultants, so we do a stream of things, primarily around AI training, so helping uplift the literacy of AI in organizations, as well as helping with strategy and even implementation of some solutions for small businesses and the like.
Amazing. No, very excited to have Daks here today. And so I really wanted to focus in on, first of all, emerging trends, particularly around business and for business owners. And then secondly, thinking about how can business owners start to think about AI, and then transitioning for using AI to increase efficiencies. What are some of the emerging trends you're seeing in AI that are exciting or that are a bit scary as well?
Everyone likes to go to the scary bits first. Look, there's a lot to unpack, and let's go through that. But in terms of trends, so we're now, over 2 years, 2.5 years since we launched ChatGPT, which was really a shining moment in AI in terms of people suddenly got access to this tool that could do things. So what we've seen so far is a lot of use of those tools, chatbots, to do a lot of productivity tasks, to do things like summarizing documents, data analysis. And most people today I speak to some degree are using it. Although when you look at an organization spread, it's still I work with a lot of large organizations to improve their AI literacy, and you see two ends of the spectrum. So you see one end where there's power users just plodding away, doing half their job with AI. And then the other end, people just don't want to touch it. And that comes back to some of the issues around things like governance, etc., and the scaredness, which we'll come to later. In terms of trends going forward, what we're seeing from this year in particular is a lot more of what people call AI agents. So the chatbot is one thing. That the agent starts to take the chatbot's knowledge and do much smarter things. So we're starting to see a lot of tools getting integrated into organizations that are actually built or even processes that have decisions made by AI. So they might send off an email based on an AI decision, or they might actually send off a text message instead. And that AI is making that decision. So that's where it becomes interesting when the AI agent is trying to make the decision on the next step in a process. So it's going from a single use to a process use, really, of AI is what we're seeing in the short term or in the next year.
And just talking about that process use, an example just for all users at home, and one I've seen recently is that someone would send me an email, I would send one back, and then instantly I'd get another email with an analysis of my email. Their AI agent has analyzed that email and then sent a response, and the business owner hasn't had to lift a finger. Is that what you're...
Yeah, that's a great example as to that's kind of where it's going. It's even more than just an email. So it might actually go and update a Google Doc or a doc in the background. It might
send
go
a text message,
do something else along the way as well. So it might be multi-thread. It might set up a calendar invite. So it could be doing many more things than just that, but you're probably seeing the email. But this brings a really big trend that AI is starting, is what I call personalization. We're able to make things a lot more personal thanks to AI. And that's something that is worth thinking about in any industry. Anything that, even small things like courses, learning is being disrupted tremendously to education by AI, because we can have a course per person. Advertising, we can have an ad produced per person, or at least per 100 different segments. So you're seeing a lot more personalization happening, which is something that's quite interesting, which we couldn't have done 5 years back, because we just don't, as humans, don't have the capability to just clone ourselves 100 times over, or 1 million times over, and have us do that. So that's one big trend. Another big trend that we're seeing is also in terms of niche players turning up. So disruption in terms of, let's say, I'll take an example of law, I'll take an example of contract law. We used to, it's pretty common to look at documents and sort of charge hourly rates for doing document analysis or looking at sort of doing contract information. And so one of the things that has happened in recent times is things like due diligence, as an example of a document, of a contract document. We never had the capability of pressing a button and getting a response in 10 minutes and 80% of 10 seconds, sorry, and 80% of the due diligence is done. It's not 100%. And this is where we can come to later in our discussion around some of the ethical and other issues, governance issues. But you're getting 80% of the way there. So if you were charging, let's say, 3 hours of work for a 20-page document or a 30-page document for due diligence. Can you continue charging that? And that's where, in every industry, I just gave you one example, but in every industry, that's where things are changing. People will start to question the value of time and the value, especially in consulting and services based. So the real impact is in consulting, in particular, producing research reports as an example. So the value has gone from producing the document or producing the content to actually the things above it, understanding the strategic use of that document, understanding the relationships, the human relationships, being able to provide the comfort that and the analysis that the information produced by AI is safe. So that's where things are going more. So those are some of the trends that we're starting to see happen more in every industry.
And just expanding on that, I know there's still going to be a lot of power in the question you ask, or what is the actual input into artificial intelligence. So then it leads to the outcome. I suppose for a lot of business owners, it's more about they're asking the wrong question or they don't know what question to ask. How can they think about that? And for a lot of business owners, it's going to be website related, it's going to be contractual information, it's going to be little ways they can start to implement until robots come around, where obviously that's going to then lead to the next advancement, which we're already seeing. Optimus, which Elon Musk is bringing around, is so forward thinking. But what are some of the inputs? Are we just focusing at the moment very much on services-based business, or do you want to expand upon that at all?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Every industry is being disrupted to some degree. Services-based business is a bit more than probably the robotic kind of businesses, because there's a bit of a lag, but there's a lot happening in the robotic space and things like that, as you talked about Optimus. But it's a lot of this is around every business needs to look at inwards, look at what tasks they're doing. You're completely right in terms of how you talk to the AI is probably the biggest benefit. If you can talk to the AI in the right way, they call it prompt engineering. And this is what I mentioned earlier on AI literacy. So it is becoming a part of your job. It really should be a part of your job, and we need everybody and it's probably the lowest hanging fruit in most organizations to use AI, is bringing everybody to a speed where they can at least 80% prompt in a way that makes sense. So simple, there's so many simple tricks of doing that, from how you try to sort of shape the question to the AI, because it's input garbage in, garbage out, even with AI. So that's really important. But it also, the way you talk to AI also impacts the ability to get answers that are trustworthy. Things like that. Answers like that are really important. So it's not only about getting the information, it's about taking it to the next level and ensuring you know how to validate the information. Make sure that if you are doing a due diligence of a document using AI rather than manually, it is only 80%. AI makes mistakes. How do you make it from 80% to 95%, and then find the 5% that AI is not doing? So those are the things that really make a difference in organizations, and on a personal level as well, of how you use AI. In terms of AI, it's gone into almost most parts of businesses. So let's take a few examples. We could look at the hiring process. AI can be used to look at CVs and jobs and match candidates. It can be used to taking interviews, first step of interviews, in terms of ensuring that you're getting the right candidates. Even if you look at
so if you just expand upon that interview process and how they would interview, so would it be very much a series of questions that the AI would input, almost have to answer, and someone would be talking into a Zoom or a Teams meeting, and the AI would be analyzing the responses of each of these individuals? Is that where we're going, or has already occurred? Is that what I'm hearing?
A lot of what has already occurred tends to still be very much in the chatbot domain. So it's not yet reached as much into visual. It's possible, and it is happening. So that's the trend, voice and then video as well. But that's happening, and it's possible 100%. It still tends to be because we need maturity of the processes. We need maturity of the technology in terms of governance and other things. And that's why I think it's still in the chatbot domain. So a lot of what an AI can do is make it a bit more intelligent. So ask the first few qualifying questions, see the response, and make a quick determination, which, to be honest, is still not, it's not taking anyone's job away. All it's doing is it's bringing it to the 80%. It's taking 80% of the work of the sort of the junk away, in a way.
It's a huge savings. Well, one of the worst processes in my mind is that interview CV analysis. Just I used to have a team of 18, and having to hire people in is just awful. Where the gamification of the whole process is it's a really bad process. There's more you can use AI, and I don't know, Daks, if you offer that for your customers, but the more I'm thinking around that, if you've got a huge staff and workforce, if you can build AI into that process, and I don't know how you try to make that as easy as possible, but yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to look at your low-hanging fruit, because that's always the easiest. So look for areas where there's a lot of repetition in task. Look for areas where there is a lot of interaction with computers, because that's kind of where it's easy fruit to do. It's easy to pick. So hiring is a great example, because, as you said, it's been gamified quite a lot, and AI can sort of ungamify it to some degree and save time. Another area could be so repeatable tasks could be, I mean, you see medical practices using it for triaging patients, as an example, or triaging who should go in to see the doctor first. And that's a really effective use of AI. Of course, again, it's an 80% decision, it's not a 100% decision, but it allows to collect a lot of personal information of each person and then make a real judgment very fast. Because if you're a doctor, or even if you're a nurse, you can't look at the person and look at the whole history in 2 seconds and understand that. So it's able to, anything that requires a lot of information, that's where you're seeing a lot of gains in AI in terms of productivity gains, at least for organizations. So look at those processes, repeatable, lots of information to analyze, to research, to documents to read. And those are the easy hanging fruit for the first. Once you've tackled those, what I suggest to most of my clients is sort of to build a little bit, it depends on the size of the organization, but to build a bit of a working group of 2 or 3 people, because in every organization, what I'm seeing is there are power users on the one hand who love using it and are interested in technology, are staying ahead, really reading about it. And you have others, obviously, at the whole spectrum. But those users channel their energy into experimenting with things, channel their energy into trying to create some guidelines around how to use the AI, channel their energy into teaching others. So I think that really helps the organizations, because every organization at the end of the day will use AI differently. They will find their own little sweet spots. And the next thing, once they've done that, is to rethink their business model as well. Is their pricing? So if we talked about services, businesses, are they charging hourly rate, as an example? Because that could be something to rethink. How's the process of delivery compared to the value they're giving? Where is the value they're giving? Is it in producing a document, as an example? So It is important to rethink your business model as well from a more ownership and strategic perspective.
And so some great, amazing points there. And one of the things I'm hearing is that anything which is almost this continual process that you will do often or repeatedly and how can you turn that into a checklist? Any of these little flags for business owners, as an example, I know, and I'm a huge believer in checklists, and there's quite a few good books on the importance of checklists. And they say that even for all pilots, airplane pilots, that when everything is a checklist, and when there's even in an emergency and there's an issue, and they've had a bird strike or whatever's engine failure, there is a checklist to follow for everything. And more for business owners, how can you turn every process in your organization that you do and create more of a process? And then from that, how can you turn that into efficiency gains, artificial intelligence? Obviously, there are some things where garbage in, garbage out. And so you want to make sure that there's, to begin with, there is human interaction around that. But as we develop, I'm sure there's going to be more trust. And we're still very much in the infancy of AI. So you can sort of see where this is heading in the next 5 to 10 years. But any comments on just flags for business owners about what they can start to turn to AI for efficiency gains?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about processes, I think AI has something really interesting. It's giving you the ability to rethink your process. So it's giving you the ability to rethink who's doing what in the process. So I think that's really important you can actually go back to sort of the drawing board and say, okay, this is my input and this is my output. You don't need to look at the process as a whole. You can look at the input and the output and rethink what needs to be done. A lot of our processes today are designed around humans, because that's the reality. They're designed around what I'd say pre-AI use of computers. So a human has to use a spreadsheet, etc., things like that. So The way to really look at it is, imagine if you had the ability to just go from your input to the output in a direct way. What are the steps that are really important that are not computer used? So what are steps like, for example, in customer service is a good example of this, where you're not going to get away. You don't want to really be taking away the human touch of the operator who's talking. On the other hand, the service staff that are talking to your customers, you don't want that to go away. But what you could help them is triage their information, provide them quick information on the client, provide them personal information about that client. Imagine how strong that is. If you swift through the history, in fact, you could go and get the LinkedIn page, scrape everything and come up and say, you know what, this client is living in this place, or his business is here, and we've observed this trend for this problem that always occurs in this area, and I would suggest that you offer them a 5% discount for next month because they've had a really tough month. That's the power of AI. You haven't got rid of anyone. All you've done is just taken a customer that maybe would have churned in the past to actually staying, and you've not given 10% away, you've given 5% away because you made that smart decision on the fly really fast, which is something you just can't do with. It's that understanding how it would take you to the next level. You don't have to go and change your workforce and have AI talk to all your customers and all that stuff. It can do that, but that's not where the value is, because...
So it's that data analysis, what you're talking about, of you're seeing a trend. I mean, you mentioned there that there's a tough economical condition in a particular area, and how do we make sure that we keep that customer on board or keep them sticky through offering a discount on our services to retain them? Is that...
Yeah, that's just an example of how a customer service or a customer support person could in real time get information that they probably couldn't in the past, and use that. But not only get the information, it's actually provide them the steer of what they can do and they can't. And so that's where AI is starting to make decisions for you as well. And that's the difference. So in the past, you would have boundaries and you have a document that would say, okay, you can give 5% if this person did this. But here you're talking about that, going back to the personalization point. This person is 5%, the next person's call might be 6%, the third call might be 3%. So you all of a sudden see that profitability improvement. You're seeing personalization of actually giving customer what they really want. So those sort of things, that's where I talked a bit about the changes in AI having in personalization. So it's per person, it's able to do the crunching per person kind of thing. So that's sort of an example, and you talked about ways, but it could be in every department of every company kind of thing. So it's just finding your sweet spots is really important.
Is it just, I suppose then data capture is going to be increasingly important for businesses and business owners. How can business owners start to think about data capture? I know, ideally we want as much from a customer as possible, and from a customer's point of view, I want to give as little as possible. How do we weigh up those conflicting points between customers' desire to give not much data because of often we don't like giving data, to a business's point of view of trying to get every data point they can. Do you have any thoughts about the best way to think about that for business owners?
Yeah, you've brought up a really good point, and I think this is probably one of the more important points about AI use. It is still important to understand what you're using your customer data for and why. So I think the ways to, so I think one way is to look at, there's currently no laws around AI, but there's a lot of guidelines out there. There are government issued voluntary safety guidelines. And the way to think about it is in a few different ways. The first thing is think about your customer. It's really important. So is the information being used, is it personalized to that customer? Are you using information you didn't gather in the right way? Where's the traceability of that information? Do you really need the information? So AI is quite good at trends. It doesn't need every person's information to give you a good response. It has enough of its own data to make good deductions. So do you actually need to keep and collect that information? On the other end of the spectrum, it also depends what you're doing. So if you're gonna produce, let's say, a personalized strategy report on something with AI and then hand it to a customer, you need to disclose that you are actually using AI to do that. But if you're using it to answer that one email, you don't need to disclose to a customer. So that's another thing to think about what you're using AI for. So you produce a report and charge $20,000. That's a problem. That's unethical.
Yeah.
you use it in emails all the time, that's fine. It's expected. And if you take a survey across, it's the pub test, right? If you asked it in a pub, is this okay with using AI for emails? Most people say, yeah, most people are doing that. Is it okay to do your whole consultancy with AI and then still charge the same amount? I think it'll come to a problem. So that's the other thing about some of the guidelines about how to use AI in the right ways and be able to disclose it and be able to be challenged. So if you can be challenged and you can hold your own, generally that's where it is today. There will be laws coming, and also there is privacy laws and data protection laws that are in place. They still apply to everything you do, even with AI. So they still overarch anything you're doing. So you have to think about them. But in terms of common sense, those are some things really to think about.
All right, now, so pivoting, we've covered off how business owners can start to think about using AI, some of the flags they can think about in their processes, and then we've also talked about data points. Now, if we sort of start to pivot about what are you seeing that's really exciting coming through? We've mentioned agents, but is there anything else you wanted to highlight, or anything people should be thinking about, particularly business owners?
Yeah, I think agents are still today's. The chat GPTs have been done already, the chatbots. What's really exciting, I think, is more around the business model transformation. I think a lot of business models are going to change. And I know I talked about services and consulting because that's still quite ripe for disruption in that sense, because AI is basically trained on services businesses, on consulting business, on everything we've been doing on the internet for the last 20 years. But business model change is something that you will see a lot happening. So would there be a world where your whole teams the whole teams are AI? There is no. And then the question then is, if you have 100 agents per person, how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? And we talked about data privacy. How do you manage that? The governance structures are in place. The other area is startups. There's a lot of startups. Almost every process is being looked at with the startup, trying to use AI in it. So what would that mean for the way you run your business? So I think that's really for most business owners, that's something to think about. So the best way is to actually look around in your industry, to look around in the specific profession that you're doing, and look around what are the tools coming up, what is and you can use AI to do that research as well. But it's important to stay, because there's a lot happening. A lot is in infancy stages, but when it changes, just like when ChatGPT came. So ChatGPT it's not like it just turned up one day. In reality, there was a lot of research happening for 5 or 6 years. It was being released in sort of open communities and all. It's just that when it became suddenly a website and everyone had access to it, then it changed. So same thing with many of these startups and these business models that are coming up. They're coming around, they're in beta stages, but one day they come and then there's no turning back. Yeah. You've suddenly got a $20 service that you were paying $2,000 for, and what do you do? Like, most people will go for the $20 service. So absolutely, that's the thing to think about.
And a huge point. And I've read a book on the AI first company, and exactly what you talk about, which is how do you set up your business model with an AI first mentality? Because if you don't, guess who is your competitor? And your competitor is going to be, and it's almost this point, a business owner who can scale very quickly and match the services and scale of large organizations just because they're nimble. Can you expand on that at all for how business owners can think about amending their business model, or should they think about, setting up their own semi-competitor to themselves, which is a bit more nimble than they are? Or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think a bit of both. So I think the first thing to look at is, so we talked about productivity gains and things like that. So are you using AI to get the most out of what you have? So experiment internally to ensure getting the most out of AI and keep growing, because every experiment you do, every service you add, everywhere you add AI, you're adding one more step closer towards more maturity of the organization learns. So that's important. In terms of whether you set up, you're seeing a lot of companies invest in AI startups. You are seeing the larger players, most larger players have some level of either investment or a group or something, or buying out smaller startups. So in that sense, companies are already making investments and sort of looking to that in terms of future. I mean, if you think about it, we've had quite a few waves of changes in business models. We've had the internet come and things changed through that. some of the big companies stay and some of the big companies go, unfortunately. So in terms of what you should do is really, I think there's no one size fits all, unfortunately, much as we'd like to think that it is really very much about thinking how the two things internally, how you can change, but also externally, what will be the change from your customers' expectations. So think about your customers' expectations. It's quite important.
And almost imitation is sometimes the greatest compliment, where any companies out there that you're seeing that are really good at this, or I suppose that's the problem, it's moving so quickly that it's hard to pinpoint it. But any companies you're seeing that are really good users of artificial intelligence, is sort of at the forefront?
It is moving too fast for that. It's definitely moving, because most people I speak to, I say, if you spoke to me 3 months back, I had a different view because things are so different. But I think if you just look at, one of the things to be aware of is just, if you just look at it, one of the problems that even AI startups have is they could be disrupted by OpenAI because they're just releasing these things for free or for very small amounts. So you could go and have built a great agent for your company, and then all of a sudden, this stuff is $20 on OpenAI, and it takes 10 minutes to create, or it may take 3 days to create, but it's trivial. So there's actually so much disruption happening within the AI itself, in the industry itself, that it's hard to sort of know what to do in that sense. And that's why the best thing to do is just sort of devote some resources of your company to keep at it, to keep experimenting, to keep getting better. So you're learning, you're trying. So when it starts to stabilize a little bit more, when we start to reach areas where you can't do too much more, we've used the 80% capacity of what the innovation is, you're at a state that you're able to actually cannibalize the business opportunity.
I saw an example of, you said to your agent, I'm inviting my friends and their names, Joe Bloggs and Emma, over for dinner, and I want to have a roast dinner for 2. And the agent would then go and order the roast leg of lamb, all of the ingredients with it from, this example was from Tesco. It would send an email from your email to Emma and Joe and put in a save the date in your calendar. So by the time it's finished, the food is at home, ready to go. Your friends have been told, we've got this dinner on. I mean, it's just staggering, the sort of the next level. But then also it's been able to use all of your logins and personal size. So I suppose maybe that's a good transition point to that next step about what should we be cautious of with AI, and is there an issue with having it use all our logins, or what do you think around that?
Yeah, so look, I'm a little biased towards the use of AI but I think this is where it does get contentious, right? Because you may have not given, you do give ChatGPT in this example, or the AI, the ability to have read your test score or connect to your test score login, which is really where it blurs out. But having said that, we are already doing that. To be honest with you, we're not far from doing that. The only difference is now that AI is helping, but often, how many times you go online and it asks you, should I use your Microsoft or Google login? How many times you log into a website and it says, before you join our service, we just need to take some stuff off your Microsoft or your Google account. And you've ticked it, and you have this list of 10 things that most people don't read. 99 out of maybe even 999 people don't read that. So I think that stuff is already happening. So the data is being shared quite a lot. I think where it becomes a little dangerous is when the AI is making a decision and there's no accountability for that decision. So let's say the AI decides to order you something different than you wanted. The traceability of why it did that is quite important to try and understand as well. And so that's where the maturity of use of the technology comes in. Also, if it has done something, this is a simple example because we're sort of ordering dinner. It's not a huge issue. But if it's used, for example, you've added your friend into the equation who's being sent this link. If they use that for something else, use that person's data for something else, that's where it starts becoming murky. But I would say some of that is already happening in the sense that we've been sharing data for 10, 15 years now. So I think that it's not a new thing. There needs to be more laws sort of governing the use of the way AI is making decisions, because that's the murky bit, is how is it making decisions, and that's what we don't know often.
And the expansion of that to where this is going, do you almost think that we're going to have our online persona? The only issue I see around that is the anonymity is quite powerful, and I quite like being anonymous, online. I don't like, arriving on an Apple site and it suddenly says, or Amazon site and it says, welcome back, here are the last 3 things you ordered. And I said, well, hang on, that's a bit much. Or, I'm driving somewhere and my Apple Google Maps says, we're going home, here's your home address. These sort of things trouble me because maybe I've read too many sci-fi books, and, Orwellian 1984 I read recently as well, and it's a stinging reminder of the big government and the fear around that. But what do you think is going to happen around personalization of the internet? Do you think we are, you said we've already lost it to some degree, but do you think there's going to become more regulation around that? An individual will need to identify themselves? Or
I think, there will definitely be more regulation if possible. It is a contentious issue because you have, Australia is trying more of that. It's harder to get implemented than we'd like. I think the thing that's happening is many of the companies will self-regulate to some degree. So you said you don't like the Apple sending you a message, for example. Others might like it. So it might figure out that you're not a person who uses that. And that's where AI is great. And it'll go, okay, let's not send that message. He's done nothing with it the last 5 times, but someone else is going, love it, let's click on it. So AI can read those signs and actually self-adjust. So what you'll find is this is where, again, it's giving you the experience, right, to your personality. And this is where AI becomes a little scary. And you're already seeing it in chatbots. It asks you questions. It starts to talk to you about, as it gathers your history, which is another scary bit in itself. It starts to personalize its questions to you, to what it knows about you. So you'll see more of that happening. So in a way, it'll self-regulate itself. But having said that, behind the scenes, the data is still there. Behind the scenes, it has been collected. So that's where there needs to be a bit of guidelines. So there's a lot of work happening around the ethical use and sort of what are the guidelines that when you're making decisions with AI. It's very early days, but that's sort of one of the areas that there's a lot of work happening right now. A lot of bodies are trying to work on that. And so I'd see in the next year or two, there will be more definitive information that allows development teams and others to be very clear on what they can do and what they can't do.
Amazing, Daks. And so just pivoting now, any closing comments? I don't know if we missed anything on the key topics in your mind, or any thoughts or closing comments. And then also just telling the audience, how would they engage with you? What's the sort of services you would offer as they start to think about their AI journey?
Yeah, my closing comment would be to think in terms of AI as a collaborator, not as somebody who'll take your jobs or anything like that. AI is really an extension of yourself, of your company. Everyone will use it differently, and that is okay. And so just understand that. That's really important. And also, don't worry about the tools, worry about the habits in that sense. Start to use AI. I would really encourage that, even if it's in figuring out your shopping list or trimming down your shopping list or something as simple as that, because every use of it will help you later on, even how to talk to it. In terms of what we do, look, you can get in contact with me on my LinkedIn, Daks at AI Unlocked, or you can contact me in other ways. What we are doing a lot of AI literacy training for large organizations. We're doing a lot of sort of coming into smaller organizations and sort of finding out how you can use AI. Very simple. Even a simple half-a-day workshop, you'd be surprised how many low-hanging fruits are there in most businesses that they can implement in under 60 days, under 30 days sometimes, and see the productivity gains straight away. So I have a background in where I actually led the development of one of Australia's largest AI platforms that are at Woolworths. And so I've have a good appreciation of what we can do, what we can't do. So I try to use that experience to help smaller businesses to sort of find their niches and find their spots of where AI can be used.
Amazing, Daks. And my key takeouts from today were the importance of your business model, and then for the flags for business owners being, what are the processes you are doing on a regular basis, and how can you start to think about efficiency gains? Yeah, thank you all for joining us on the Fox and the Hedgehog, and we will see you for the next episode. Thank you.